Good morning, if you're on the East Coast or further west than that. Welcome to the Mesila webinar for single mothers. This is the fifth in our series. My name is Gedalia Litke. I've been involved with Mesila in various respects over the past several years. And it's a pleasure to be with you this morning, and to launch the fifth of the series, which is about reducing expenses. Okay, Mesila webinar for single mothers, reducing expenses. So I think the first thing that we want to do is we want to define what it is we're trying to achieve. What we're trying to achieve is financial stability. I'm going to stop for a second because I'm feeling unstable because I keep staring at myself in the screen, and I wish there was a way to make it minimized. Here we go. Much better. Okay. The first thing that we want to do is we want to decide what our goal is. And our goal is financial stability. What does that mean? Financial stability does not mean I'm wealthy. It doesn't mean I have a big bank account. Financial stability means that my relationship with finances is healthy and stable. It means that finances do not get in the way of my simchas hachayim, my relationships, my avodas Hashem. And financial instability we would define as exactly the opposite, where the finances in my life impede my relationships. Did I say this backwards? I did. Where we're now going to define financial stability as being where my relationship with money actually improves my simchas hachayim, my relationships, my avodas Hashem. Instability means that the money is controlling me as opposed to me being in charge of the money, and the money being just a part of my life. So if we define financial stability this way, we know very quickly that it has nothing to do with how much money you have. You all know very wealthy people who are financially unstable because they're completely beholden to their finances. And you also all know people who are very, very poor, but they're financially stable because their poverty and their relationship with their money does not rule their life. It's an aspect of their life. In order to achieve financial stability, there's really only one way, and that is to know and have awareness of what your financial situation is. Doesn't mean that becoming aware is going to make your financial situation better. But oftentimes we're afraid to engage in a process of getting to know in detail our financial situations because we're afraid that knowing the truth is going to make it worse. And the fact is that knowing the truth always makes it better. It's less comfortable sometimes going through the process. But if the process of going through financial details and budgeting is difficult, painful, and uncomfortable, then not doing that is infinitely more painful and uncomfortable in the long run, and maybe not even in the long run, maybe very soon. So there are really just two ways to become aware of our finances, and that is by knowing what our income is and what our expenses are. And today, we're going to be talking about expenses. Increasing income and enhancing income is vitally important. I know that there was a session, the fourth session was about that, and that is something that is extremely important, because in so many cases, expenses really have been pared down, if not to the bone, pretty close to the bone. And what more can we do to pare expenses? We need to do something to increase income. Paring expenses, a lot of times you can do things quickly. That's not always a good idea, but one could theoretically reduce expenses quickly. It's very rare that one is able to increase income quickly. So I would like very much to take the tack here that we're not trying to do anything quickly. We're trying to do something well, thoroughly, and lasting. And in life, as we all know, the things that are worthwhile and lasting don't come easily, and it doesn't come quickly. But through a process, a slow and consistent process, real change can occur. So just to give you an illustration, if you have if you make $50,000 a year and you spend $55,000 a year, in other words, you're $5,000 underwater every year, then after 5 years, you're going to have a problem of $25,000 that you owe, because you obviously borrowed the extra money in order to keep afloat. On the other hand, if you make $50,000 a year and you spend $45,000 a year, in other words, you're spending $5,000 a year less than you're earning, so you have a surplus every year, then obviously after 5 years, you'll have a surplus of $25,000. So there's a swing of $50,000 up or down based on whether your income and expenses are 10% above water or 10% below water. So that little 10% difference, that's what we're after, because that's what makes the difference in the long run, and that's where true change can occur. The way to remember this is the difference between being a malve, a lender, that's what we want to be, and being a love, a borrower, which we do not want to be. The difference between being a malve and a love is a mem. That's the only letter that's different between malve, the Hebrew word for lender, and love, the Hebrew word for borrower. Mem in gematria can be spelled out as the modern Hebrew word le'at. Lamed Aleph Tes is 40. And that's how we have to do this. We have to go la'at, we have to go slowly. So in order to go from being a lova to a malva, if you want to add on that mem and become in a more financially stable position, it has to be done slowly. There's no magic pill. There's no lottery ticket that's going to help you with this. You know the lottery joke where two people share in a lottery ticket, and amazingly they actually win $1 million each. So one fellow says to the other, "What are you going to do with your $1 million?" He says, "Well, I'm want to have a vacation in Hawaii, and I want to buy a car, and I want to buy a house, and all the things he's going to do." "And what about you?" He says, "Well, I'm going to use it to pay off debts." So he says, "Okay, but what about the rest?" He says, "Well, the rest, they're just going to have to wait." So a lottery ticket is not a magic pill, and there's no investment that you're going to borrow money from your house or from any other source and you're going to invest, and in 3 months, all of a sudden your financial issues are going to be solved. That's called too good to be true. And if it's too good to be true, then it's not true. So again, there's just two ways to get into shape. Sorry. There's just two ways to get into financial shape. One is to increase income. One is to lower expenses. Today, we're going to talk about expenses. So I'm going to make a very big deal about a budget, even though in previous sessions we've talked about budgets in this series, because it bears repeating, and because without a budget we can't really talk about expenses in an intelligent way. Someone once said that without a budget, it's like driving in a snowstorm without a GPS. And someone else said, no, it's like driving in a snowstorm without four-wheel drive. And then finally, someone said it most accurately, it's like driving in a snowstorm without a steering wheel. Why? Why is the budget so critical? Because you can't really get to square one without it. You can't say, let's say a person wants to have more income. A person wants to lose weight. A person wants to get into shape. You can't say, okay, I want to get into shape and that's my goal, and now I'm going to go get in shape. There has to be a specificity to the goal so that you know what you're trying to achieve, and you can develop ways of actually achieving it. If a person just says, I'm going to lose weight after Yontif, that's how we normally hear about it, then it's a pretty good chance that person's not going to lose weight after Yontif. The person says, you know, I need to lose 12 pounds, and this is how I plan on doing it. The first week I'm going to do this, and the second week I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to join this group. And they have a plan for how they're going to lose the weight, change their eating habits. Then there's a pretty good chance that that's actually going to happen. I would say there's a very good chance it's going to happen because they have a very specific way that they're going to go about it. So without the specifics of knowing what the details of the financial situation are, there's no way to really get there. A person who says, I want to get into financial shape, but he doesn't know how much per month is needed in order to bridge the budget gap, well, then that person is just talking. If on the other hand, the person has done his homework and knows that there is $200 a month that they're short, then they know they have a $200 problem. And when I have a $200 a month problem, I can begin to address it by finding ways to make a little bit more money, or perhaps finding ways to spend a little bit less, or usually it's some combination of the two. So when we define a budget, the way I like to think about it is, I just was pulling out a $5 bill from my pocket. Because if I have $5 in my pocket, do I really have $5? And the answer is, it depends. It looks like I have $5, but if I have to, as soon as this webinar is over, go to Walmart to buy school supplies for my kids, then I don't have $5 in my pocket. I mean, I have $5 in my pocket, but I don't have $5. The $5 is spoken for already. That's what a budget is. A budget says, don't look at a single frame, at a single photograph. You have to look at the whole video, at the whole movie. You have to look at all the frames and see how they fit in with one another. What has happened in the past, what's happening right now, and what's expected to happen in the future. And we tie those all together, and that's what a budget is. Reb Moshe Shimon Beneth, the Dayan of the Belzer Kehillah here in Muncie, told me a story which to me concretizes the idea of a budget in a really sharp way. He said that he made chasanas for his kids, and in the Chassidish minhagim, you know, they have a mitzvah tans, which goes very, very late into the wee hours, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And Rabbi Beneth was determined that at his kids' chasana, that the mitzvah tans was going to be over by 12 o'clock, by 1 o'clock, at more of a decent hour. So he got some pushback and people were complaining to him. And so one person said to him, I don't understand. Says, it's your child's wedding. It's once in a lifetime. And Rabbi Beneth answered, tomorrow morning is also once in a lifetime. That's budget defined. Just because I have an hour available right now, it doesn't mean that I have an hour, because if I have a report that's due tomorrow or I have something else that has to get done this week, and this is the only hour that I can get it done in, then I don't have this hour, even though it is otherwise seems to be an unstructured hour. We have found that there are immediate benefits to starting to work on a budget, to watch expenses, to count expenses, to track expenses, as tedious as it sounds and as tedious as it is, frankly. But there are immediate benefits. One thing that's really interesting is that as soon as a person starts tracking their expenses and keeping, real awareness of what they're spending, all of a sudden the coffee in the office starts to taste really good, and the coffee at Starbucks or the corner coffee shop doesn't taste as good anymore. Because at the end of the day, this coffee drinker knows that they're going to have to write down on a piece of paper what they spent today. And they can be embarrassed to write down that they went to the coffee shop and they spent $2.75 or more on a cup of coffee, when they could have gotten the coffee for free in the office or in school or wherever they are. So expenses go down immediately when people track expenses. The second thing is that my experience has shown, working with many families, that as soon as people decide, you know what, I'm going to do this the right way, and I'm going to come up with a budget, and we're going to try to do this the right way, the Rebbeinu Shalom steps in and with some form of siyata d'shmaya that is almost in every case that I'm aware of. I've seen this, where an uncle drops $800 on them that they weren't expecting, or someone gets a raise that they weren't expecting, or the car is in by the mechanic, and yesterday they were told that it's a $1,200 job to fix the car. And this morning the mechanic calls and says, you know what, I realize it's just this and this, and it's only $150. There's some little sign that comes across to show that the Rebbeinu Shalom is with us in this difficult path. And I've seen that really time and time again, and it's quite striking. The main benefit of writing things down is that it concretizes the attitude that we want to have about spending and about expenses. Imagine if every time you walked into a store, you had the following thought: I'm walking into a store to buy things. My goal is to buy only the things that I need at the lowest possible price. However, the storekeeper, as I walk into the store, has a different goal. The storekeeper's goal is that I should buy things that I do not need at the highest possible price. If we keep that attitude in mind when we walk into a store, when we turn on the computer and go to Amazon, or however we do our shopping, if we concretize the attitude, then we're going to be in good shape. The way to concretize the attitude is to make it real by keeping track on a regular basis. Now, before I continue to talk about streamlining expenses, which is the main topic, there are financial issues which are obviously unique to single parent families, and I want to call out some of them that I have encountered in working with people. There is a lot of anxiety and concern about being the only breadwinner. It's possible that mom is now going to start working longer hours in order to make ends meet, and wondering to herself whether these hours are reasonable because the money is needed, or unreasonable because it's putting even greater stress on the kids. More stress probably not needed in the situation, given what probably transpired before mom was alone with the kids. Sometimes you're just so worn out from what has occurred that you're just not ready to go to work or don't feel like you're ready to go to work. There's an unhealthy aspect sometimes where people are looking for pity, or they're looking to stay on welfare or other government programs and think that that's better than going to work. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the longer they wait, the harder it is to go out and get work, because they're not accustomed to it, and because their skill set starts to suffer relative to the marketplace. A lot of times the single parent families have to get used to a much lower standard of living. There are always challenges with the children and involving them in ways that they should not be involved, in the fact that there are financial challenges, the lack of income. In a divorce situation, there's obviously the challenge of involving the children in the emotional tangles that are going on between the spouses, the ex-spouses, and each one wanting to show the kids that they are the preferred spouse, the preferred parent rather, and therefore buying them off with goodies and things, and wind up spending money that didn't need to be spent, that shouldn't have been spent. That's not the main problem with that scenario, obviously, but we're talking about the money part of it, and it does lead to additional financial stress. Those are some of the things that I've come across. There are others, and I want to make it clear that if in general we feel that Mesila feels that cutting expenses is a very individual and subjective process. And what works for one person, one family, is not going to work for another family. And every person and every family has to find their own way as to what's going to work for them, what's manageable for them. Then certainly in a situation where a woman finds herself without a husband in the house, and raising children and working and trying to keep it all together, it is very, very important not to compare one situation to the other. I'm not talking about one situation of a single mom versus an organic family where there's a mom and a dad in the house. We're certainly not going to compare those. I'm saying even to compare one single mom's situation to another single mom's situation is not fair and is not reasonable, because everyone's situation is different and requires attention to different aspects and different details. And I'll try to demonstrate this as I go through here. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about streamlining expenses, and then we'll take a break, and I'll be happy to take any questions that you might have. So I think one thing that's important to say about streamlining expenses is that although it takes effort, it takes sometimes ingenuity, it does not mean that the family is deprived and starving. You're going to have what you need, Mitzvah Hashem. There are two kinds of expenses. I'm sorry, there are two kinds of cuts to expenses. There are what we'll call the painful cuts. And then there are the less painful, sometimes even painless, cutting of expenses. So let's start with the easy one. What's a painless cut that one could make to expenses? You could find a cheaper cell phone plan. You could move your grocery shopping to a different store. That might be a little bit painful depending on circumstances, but it might be really painless. When you're in Walmart, buy a full year's worth of school supplies at the September sales prices and then you'll have all the magic markers and the notebooks and everything ready in the cabinet when they're needed later in the year, and you may even have some left over for the beginning of next year. Buying better quality shoes for the kids, let's say, that will last maybe longer. Maybe for kids that's not a good idea. Maybe it's just for the adults because the kids are still growing. But the concept is to buy higher quality goods that cost a little bit more but will last much, much longer, and over the long run will be a financial benefit, taking everything into consideration. So these are examples of relatively painless cuts, and there's a lot of areas where you can come up with these kinds of savings, and you can save a lot of money. I know that we've done it here in our house, just working on the phone bills, the electric, the gas and electric bills. You can now, in this part of the country, anyway, you can find providers of gas and electric supply that are less than the main suppliers, and just those two items alone amount to hundreds of dollars a year in savings. And there are many other areas in Muncie. In Mesila and Muncie, we have pretty much the same as in Baltimore. We have a very elaborate budget worksheet. It's like 6 pages long. It has hundreds of entries on it. And it's very hard and painful to fill that out. What's good about it is that it covers every imaginable expense that a frum family might have. And wherever there's an expense, there's an opportunity to spend less on that item, even if you can't eliminate it altogether. So that spreadsheet is and I know that Josh Horowitz spoke to you about that spreadsheet. It's a good sort of checklist for going through all the different things in your financial life that might be looked at to see if there are areas where savings can be had. The more painful deductions cut into our day-to-day life in a much more substantial way. If you're used to spending, summers in a certain way in a certain place, and now the financial situation doesn't permit to go away to that nicer place for the summer, so you're dealing with a major change, and it's going to be felt by everyone very sharply. So, if going back to my earlier statement that change has to occur slowly in order to be lasting, and in order for it to work, certainly drastic cuts, painful cuts, have to be made very, very cautiously, conservatively, as a last resort, so that keeping financial balance doesn't wind up becoming a reason why emotional balance has been lost. Financial balance is important. Emotional balance is just as important, probably more so. So we might need to release a certain presumption or a hold on the past of the way we used to live, and set aside what used to be, discover new kinds of vacation that are less costly. But we have to also be careful for ourselves, for our children, not to do anything too rapidly and too drastically at the expense of people's emotional well-being. The best way to go through the expense cutting exercise, besides being thoughtful, careful, and deliberate, is to benefit from other people's experience and ask them where they were able to trim costs. That's a very, very valuable tool. It's cathartic because you're talking to others who are dealing with the same issues that you're dealing with. And here's the thing: every one of your neighbors is dealing with this. I don't care what their house looks like. I don't care how many cars are in the driveway or how new they are. Everyone, with rare exception, everyone that you know is dealing with these issues of trying to manage expenses. And I am certain that many of your acquaintances and friends have thought about what can they do about the phone bill, what can they do about the gas bill, what can they do about the dry cleaning, and other day-to-day expenses, insurance, even things like rent and tuition. It's really interesting that there are people who have thought about different ways to keep costs down, to rent out a room, to rent out a driveway, to offer in lieu of cash payment for tuition certain services to the schools, which they're sometimes eager to have from you. So there's always a conversation to be had, and it's really valuable to talk to other people. Again, not to conclude from the other person's experience what's right for me. I can't emphasize that enough. But because I'm somewhat ignorant or naive or unschooled in developing financial stability for myself, I want to get as much information from the world around me, from the people around me, about their financial, what they have done in particular ways. We're not going to go around asking people how much they make and what their finances are like, but we can ask people, did you find an inexpensive way to do this? How do you manage school supplies? It's so expensive. It's have you figured out any way to sort of temper it a little bit? And then you can pick and choose from these various conversations the ones that you think are relevant and applicable to your own situation. There is a world of resources in the library, and if you're an online type of person, there's a world of resources online about budgeting, financing, household finances, different ways to manage expenses and to try and cut expenses. Not all of them are appropriate for a firm family. You can't eat macaroni and cheese on Leil Shabbos, and you can't, you can't send your kids to public school where there's free tuition. But there is a lot out there that really is applicable to everybody and very valuable to read up on. And again, another benefit is the fact that you'll feel less alone. You won't just feel, you'll realize how ordinary your circumstances. That might not be pleasant for some of us to discover that our problems are everyday ordinary problems. But as one of my friends always says, I never like going to the doctor and hearing the word, oh, interesting. So there's nothing interesting about most of our situations. It's ho-hum, been there, done that. Someone's thought about it. Someone's dealt with it in the past. And the job really is to get to know ourselves and to see where we fit in, and to get as much information and help that's available out there. Back to the point about cutting expenses as a very individual and subjective process. I would say we were talking about two kinds of cuts, painless versus painful. I would say that one person's painless cut to another person could be drastic. I was working with a family, and after we did all the paperwork and the calculations, we figured out that their monthly problem is about $400. In other words, they're missing about $400 a month of income, or they have to cut expenses $400. One of the line items in their budget is I have a 12-year-old daughter, and she's having weekly ice skating lessons and horseback riding lessons and some other stuff too. And that came to over $500 a month. And I was tempted, had I not been well trained by Mesila, I was tempted to basically reach across the table and well, I don't want to say throttle them, but it can be very frustrating when you're working with a family and they have a $400 problem, and they're spending $500 on what I thought was Narishkeit, ice skating, and horseback riding. But I knew not to do that, and the reason I didn't do that, and the reason I was trained not to do that, is because I have no idea why they decided to give this 12-year-old girl those lessons. Maybe that's what's keeping her off the streets. Maybe that's what's keeping her out of much more serious emotional damage. And maybe, I don't know what. I'm not the parent in that situation, and it's not for me to judge that. It's vital to be therefore very realistic about your own situation and not be swayed by how other people are handling things. Be informed by them, but don't be swayed. Should I cook more and then I won't buy as much prepared food and then we'll save money? Or should I work a few extra hours, but then I'll have to buy prepared food? For one person, the answer is going to be one way, and for another person, the answer is going to be another way. It's going to depend what's going on with the kids, what's going on with the job, where do those extra hours of work lead to in terms of future possibilities and opportunities. Is cooking something that you love to do and it makes you feel good about yourself? Is cooking something that you really don't like doing and it's a real burden and a chore? There's a lot that goes into that conversation, and that's why you can't be swayed by what the other person did, but you should be informed by what the other person did. I think it's very worthwhile to get your kids involved in the family budget overall challenge of it. They shouldn't know how much money we're making or what our deficits are or anything like that. But keep them involved, especially if change is coming. And change is imposed on the kids, and there's no warning. You're gonna create a lot of tension, obviously, and resistance. If you have shall we say, a meeting, and we involve them in the decisions. Okay, we have a limited amount of money set aside for school supplies. So here are the choices. We can use the same backpacks as last year, use them again this year, or we can get the new backpack, but then notebooks, markers, and all that stuff is going to be all the off-brand, no labels, no name labels on all of that stuff. Which way do you guys prefer? And our experience is that you'll get more cooperation, not to mention that you're teaching your kids wonderful and important life skills when you do that. And above all is to really try to avoid conveying to yourself and to your children that having to streamline expenses is some unbelievable Mesiras Nefesh, and we're all just such suffering martyrs to have to go through this. It can be very matter of fact with ourselves and with our kids. Nobody has everything. We have what we need. We have some things that we want, not everything that we want, and we have to make choices. And finally, before I take questions, two more brief points. One is I want to make sure that you are aware that there is a kind of overspending that can be a mental health issue, sort of like an addiction, where the person is spending because it gives them a rush, it gives them a feeling of power and comfort that most people do not get from shopping and spending. I only say this because if that's what's going on in a particular situation, then this whole conversation is irrelevant, and that person first needs to get help for their spending problem before we can get back to the regular Bechira issue of having to control expenses under certain circumstances. And finally, I just wanted to plug a couple of Mesila material. Well, one in particular. This is a wonderful book. It's called Your Money and Your Life. For those of you on the phone, it's by Heimowitz, Heimowitz, and it's published by Mesila. It's their down-to-earth Torah-based strategies for managing your finances. It's wonderful, truly a wonderful book. A lot of work went into it, and it's got brief chapters on so many aspects of finances that you will find very, very useful, I think. And Mesila also has all kinds of budgeting guides. I'm just holding up one of them here, Student Guide to Budgeting, but they have a full roster of publications that are very useful. And it's not just Mesila that does, as I said, the library is full of good materials, and you should really become educated and make yourself avail yourself of all those resources. I am happy to take any questions if there are any, and if not, then I thank you for being a wonderful audience, and I enjoyed being able to give this presentation today. Mirz Hashem, Tichla Shana V'Kilo Seha. And that's what the Gemara says. The Paitan, right before on Erev Rosh Hashanah, the last piyut, the piyut that we say right before Rosh Hashanah starts, Achos Lanu Katana. We have a sister. We're talking to the sisters now. We're talking to the women who have more than their hands full, taking care of their children, and the Paitan adds to the Gemara's lashon of Tichla Shana V'Kilo Seha, that the year and its curses should end. The Paitan adds Tachal Shana U'Bircho Seha, that the new year should begin with its blessings. And Mirz Hashem, everyone should have a good Gebench Dior and financial success and good health and all good things. Thank you so much for listening. I'm happy to take any questions. Okay, sounds like there's no questions, and so I'm going to sign off now. Thank you so much.